I used to spend a long time just crying and just like being so annoyed that I couldn't change aspects of myself. At the beginning, I was very much like, I don't want to talk about the trans thing because it has nothing to do with my music. And that is definitely the case sometimes, but like that video that I made a few months ago, like 40 minutes long, was me just being like, hey, like I've gotten past the hard point of being trans. Like I've gotten past coming out, I've gotten past transitioning, I've gotten past all of the backlash that, you know, you get from like friends and family, which luckily I didn't have much of. But because I did all of that on the internet, there was like a lot going on. So I feel like at this point, because there's such a rise in transphobia with like, even just like since I've been here in the US and the UK, they've both put forward changes in laws that would take away rights from trans people. So I feel like the way that I write music is I write about what I'm feeling about. And my first song that I released was about being trans because I was 15 and I felt horrible and I didn't see a future for myself. Whereas now I'm writing about being trans because I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, come on, we've got past the hard point and now there's just more. So it's difficult. Like, I definitely don't want to be known as a trans musician because I'm just a musician that's trans, and I'm sure there are plenty of musicians that are also like have ADHD or are gay or like anything else, but that has very little impact on what they write about. Within the scene, there's a lot of people that are very stuck in their ways, which I think is kind of hypocritical because they grew up being the outsiders, and now that they're older, they're like, oh, we don't like what you're doing because it's different from what we were doing. A lot of them will be like, oh, you've just been signed because you're gay or because you're trans, and like literally the first meeting that I had with my label, we were just like, yeah, we don't want to make that a thing because we just want to release your music about how you feel. But I'm also very aware that there are kids that come to shows that will come up to me and be like, I want to be like you when I'm older. Like, I'm trans and I see what you're doing and I want to do what you're doing. So like, I can't be too mad about it. I did a tour here for the first time last year, and that was when it really all hit me because like I played like 3 shows in Texas, and I had kids coming up to me and being like, yeah, so like I'm kind of terrified right now because they've just passed this new rule that if anybody at school finds out I'm trans, they have to tell my parents, and my parents are the most bigoted people you'll ever see, and I won't be safe. So it really hit me last year that kids that are coming to my shows are dealing with that every day, and it's not just something that I see on the news. Whereas like, since I've come this year, I don't remember the specific bill, but in Texas and in Tennessee, by September, if the law passes, I won't be able to perform to under 18s because I'll be classed as a drag act. Because I wear guys' clothes. I don't know, it's weird going to places where I feel like I know that the majority of the people there wouldn't be happy with me being there, because that's not something that I've really felt in the UK, even though there are parts of the UK that are not that great. But like, I more feel bad for the kids that have to live in the places that I'm just visiting, because like, I know that like, I'll visit a state once, the next day I'll be out and I'll be chill. So like, if I go to Texas, I'm gone in a few days and I don't have to deal with the repercussions of like what the government is doing. But it's more just like seeing the kids and seeing what they deal with that is the hardest part. Obviously, every trans person will have a completely different experience. Just in my experience, like, my gender dysphoria was, like, debilitating. A day in the life would be, like, wake up, look in the mirror, get really upset, go back to bed. So there's a thing called, like, a chest binder that, like, flattens your chest, and I would wear that, like, 24/7. Oh, it was very painful, and it wasn't good for you, but, like, even after I got top surgery, I was dealing with the repercussions of binding for 5 years because, like, I couldn't take a full breath. But, like, not being able to take a full breath wasn't just, like, physical. It felt like I was always on edge, really. But it was the kind of thing that affected every aspect of my life. Like, I wouldn't be able to answer phone calls just because the sound of my own voice and worrying that somebody on the other line was going to be like, hi, miss, was just, like, so stressful for me. And I guess it was just, like, this constant feeling of never being comfortable. It was, like, no matter what situation I was in, there was always this, like, quite high level of like discomfort. And yeah, it was the kind of thing where like there were things that you could do to help. Like you could put on a binder and you could wear clothes, but like one day you'd feel fine wearing one set of clothes and the next day you wouldn't be able to leave your house. But I was living in an all-girls boarding house and we had like school dinners and you had to wear dresses and the dress codes were insane. Like boys weren't allowed hair below their ear, girls weren't allowed any hair that wasn't tied back. So it was a very like gendered place. And I think it was just like this constant state of being uncomfortable that like, as you said, like the suicide rates, like once you transition, go down an insane amount. And I heard this point the other day that like if there was an antidepressant that had the success rate that transition does for trans people that it does for like suicide and people who have depression, they would call transition a wonder drug. The percentage of people whose mental health increases like after transitioning is higher than any antidepressant, and like there's more regret rate within people who have hip surgery than there is with people that have like gender affirming surgery. So it's like it's very cut and dry. It's very easy to see, but like it's just difficult that people don't want people to see that. I had like my first therapy session when I was like 11 or 10 or something, because I had like, there were like 3 or 4 events within the space of 6 months that like my parents were just like, you need to go talk to somebody. And one of those things was like the suicide of my aunt, and like I was in the house when that happened. That was like the most impactful thing that's ever happened in my life. So like the most annoying thing about going to therapy when I was 11 was just like, are you planning to kill yourself? And I was like, no, because I've seen the impact that has on other people. And because I wasn't planning on it, they classified my depression as mild. That kind of thing where it's like, I had suicidal ideation. I didn't want to live, I didn't want to exist, but I wouldn't have been able to physically do that because I saw the impact that it had on like everybody in my family. And that was like the most annoying thing about being 10 years old, being like, these people don't know how I'm feeling, and they're trying to tell me that I'm not feeling as bad as I am. I feel like during that time, it wasn't that I was having thoughts. There are like blank spots for like maybe like 3 years there. I wouldn't be able to tell you what thoughts I was feeling other than like, oh Jesus, this sucks. Like I would spend most days just sleeping because I lived in a boarding school. If I wasn't in class, I was asleep. If I wasn't at sports, I was asleep. So it was mostly just like, I wasn't able to process my thoughts. I'm very easily overwhelmed. So I think it was just like a good few years of just that. I mean, I think that I'm not good enough feeling, that's always been a thing, and especially within like being trans, like, and I feel like less now because I've kind of just like accepted the fact that like I am who I am. I used to spend a long time just crying and just like being so annoyed that I couldn't change aspects of myself. But the not good enough feeling was mostly just like, I have this picture of myself that I will never be able to achieve. And I think that was the hardest thing to get past. And like, even now, like, obviously there's like imposter syndrome, because I'm like, I guess I'm doing cool stuff. I have no idea how I got here. But yeah, the not good enough thing I think has always been a thing. I know that like a lot of the kids that are watching me or that are coming to my shows or that like have heard of me or that like me have like kind of an identical life experience. And I know that they may be in the place that I was in when I was like 15, 14, not feeling good enough, feeling really alone, thinking that there was no future, because I think that's a lot of what happens with trans people when they haven't figured themselves out. They can't see a certain point in their life because they've been told, they've been programmed to believe that like, oh, they'll grow up and they'll blossom into a beautiful woman and they'll find a man and they'll get married and they'll have kids, and that's very hard to see past when you're not a girl. So I'd say that just like, it may be very difficult right now, and I definitely know how that feels, but believe me, even though it sucks, like time does make things better. Like if you're a kid and you're dealing with like really unsupportive parents right now, as long as it feels and as long as it actually is to grow out of that space, like you can leave home. School is definitely not the best years of your life, especially for people like me. I don't want to be like, it does get better, but like time changes everything, and like you will not feel the same way that you feel right now in 5 years.
Upset, more of the story, life's a bit batshit.